Okay, it looks like we're ready to start. So, welcome to my talk on Tor. I'm Sebastian Hahn. I'm a volunteer with the Tor project for the past 3 years. And I'm happy to present Tor as a source this year. First, let's start off with what is Tor? Tor is both a software and a company. Tor provides a network that is formed by everyone who runs the Tor client software. And Tor is completely open source. Everything Tor does as a project is available for public inspection. We have an open community of developers, of users, and we have a ton of volunteers. Basically, without our volunteers, Tor couldn't work, because the volunteers are those who drive the network. Because Tor is freely available and works well, provides anonymity, people thought that they could try it for Circumvention. And that is a rather new use for Tor, the software, but it's becoming increasingly popular. So let's for a second talk about Tor, the company. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. That's a US not-for-profit organization. And the organization develops free tools to enhance online privacy and provide anonymity. Tor has grown a lot over the past years as an organization. We've currently about 15 funded part or full-time employees or contractors. We have a lot of volunteers, like I am a volunteer, for example, and everyone who runs a relay in the Tor network helps us make Tor grow. Tor used to be a research project, initially started by the US Navy, but since then has evolved to being its own company and developing on their own. And our funders include parties that some might think don't really like each other that much. For example, the Electronic Frontier Foundation has funded us in the past. The US government has funded us, and other various huge NGOs are funding Tor. Another big part of what makes Tor work is that we have private citizens interested in the technology, and those people have also donated. The network is also growing. We're currently at about 2,000 relays that are up at any time. The number fluctuates a little because a lot of people are running Tor relays from their home, and the availability of connections is, of course, dependent on whether you're awake and at your computer or not. But we have between, I think, 1,900 to 2,100 relays up at any moment. Over the past month, we've averaged 5 gigabits per second in data going through the network, which means that obviously it's being used. And it's really hard to have a good guess at the number of users, because of course we're an anonymity tool, so we don't want to screw users' privacy. But we do have some metrics, and that indicates that we have approximately 500,000 users every day. And based on our download numbers, we are thinking that a lot more people have installed Tor. They're just not using it on a daily basis. Here we have a graph for the existing data of the Tor network. You can see the relays. This is a glitch in the graph, in the data collection engine. This one is not. So at some point recently, we had about 500 extra relays that were added to the network, but we quickly cut them out to keep the safety promises that Tor has. You can see the number of relays, approximately 2,000, and then there's bridges. What bridges are, this is how Tor is useful for circumvention, and we're going to get to that in a bit. You can see the number of bridges is substantially lower, and we'd like to get more. So, this is the advertised bandwidth, so the capacity of the network. We're currently well above 800 megabyte per second, which means, if you remember the 5 gigabit per second throughput, that we have some slack capacity available. So currently it looks like we could actually push more data if we had more users. So, what is this anonymity thing anyways? Anonymity is for a lot of people, and there's a nice story about the NSA, and they used to run their own phone company so that when people were called by them, they didn't know it was the NSA, except everybody who called from that company was an NSA employee. So that really didn't work. What you need for an anonymity network to work is that you have a diverse set of users, and Tor provides just that. For government, we provide traffic analysis resistance, which means that you can, which also was the original design, or the idea why the Navy designed it, you can send your data from across the world without your adversary knowing where it's going and who you're talking to. For private citizens, privacy is a big concern. They increasingly realize that a lot of what they say online, of what they do, can reflect badly on their lives. For example, have you ever Googled for cancer? When you did that, did you worry that maybe your insurance company is going to raise your premium? These things can happen, and there have been court cases where your past search history was used against you to say that you had prior knowledge of a pre-existing condition. So, this is something that affects basically everyone. For businesses, Tor is useful because when you look for a patent, you might not want your competitor who happens to run the infrastructure that the patenting software system runs on to know what you're looking for, to not give them an edge into what your research is about. So businesses need something like anonymity. And then it's kind of bolted on and wasn't part of the original design, but it just happens to work extremely well for circumvention. If people don't know where you're going, then they can't block you based on where you're going. So Tor has seen a lot of use from places like China, Iran, but also corporate networks that basically filter the websites that you can go to. And for these, they just provide an open and free web. So, let's go to the regular citizen who is basically doing nothing special. But we don't know what their internet service provider, for example, is doing with the data that they can collect. So maybe your internet service provider wants to make some extra money and sells the traffic logs to advertisers. That might not be immediately a bad thing for you, but the profile just adds up. And in the end, someone can, just based on where you are on the web, really predict what you're going to do next. Maybe they realize that you've not been online much for the past 2 weeks, or not online at all. Maybe you're on vacation. Maybe it's a good time to rob your house. Then, of course, the parties that collect your data aren't always the great protectors of that data. So even if they don't sell your data to make a profit, maybe they store it on the web. Maybe their software has a bug. And so it's best to not generate this data in the first place. And that is what Tor is all about. You can connect to any website that you want to connect to, and nobody can link you and the website together. And unless you provide personally identifying information to the website won't know who you are, which is also important. So, it gets worse if you are a high-profile person. Maybe you just uploaded a police brutality video, and maybe you didn't do that in a Western country, but you did that in Iran. So you're really concerned about your safety. And the first thing about places like Iran, for example, is that they attempt to block. For example, YouTube, you can't upload. So that's the first problem. You have this video, and you have no way to share it. But the second and more severe problem is maybe you find a way to circumvent this blocking. But then, once you've uploaded the video, maybe the government can track you and can say, hey, it was you, we're going to put you in prison. And that's not what people usually want to do. The less severe side of this is that maybe YouTube is plugged, and you just like to watch videos there. And this would be you in some kind of private place, and your ISP just doesn't want you to access certain information. So this is another use case where circumvention software is important. The next step, or what we're going to talk about most today, is exactly this circumvention case. But first, how does Tor even work? The really easy designs, they just have a single relay in the middle. It's like a proxy. But the problem with that is that every connection that you make goes to that proxy. So someone might want to start looking into that proxy. Or maybe the proxy is run by a company that wants to make a profit and sells all your data. Maybe they realize, hey, the Iranians will be really interested that it was you who uploaded that video, and they're going to sell that data. Not so good for you. But even assuming that the organization is totally honest, and that they have no security bugs, that all of their employees are following the rules, maybe their upstream isn't so nice. And because every connection is going directly through them, it's very easy to link the connection together just based on the timestamp. So you see the connection goes in, and the connection comes out. You can correlate based on the timestamp. You get a very high accuracy, and the single hop is just circumvented. So what Tor does is it adds more than one proxy. The idea is that in the first step, you connect to the first relay. And nobody except the first relay and you and everybody in between know that you are talking together. All the other relays don't have that knowledge, and the website that you're going to doesn't have that knowledge either. Now that you've made a connection with the first relay, you ask it to make a connection to the second relay, and then from there to the third. The point is that the third relay at this point already has no idea who you are. So even if they lock all your traffic, and even if they try to analyze you, they don't really have a way to correlate that with you personally. Unless, of course, you provide the data voluntarily. So, to get a bit more technical, To protect the content, you establish a connection with the first relay. You establish a session key that all further communication will be encrypted to. Then you ask the first relay to connect to the second, and you just use it as a tunnel. So you can now directly talk to the second relay. Once again, you establish session keys, and you go to the third. And this is why Tor, the underlying principle, is called onion routing, because basically you're wrapping layers of encryption on your data. And as your data travels through the network, the onion gets peeled. And at the end, at the last hop in the Tor network, your data is again in clear to pass on to the wide web. So there's problems. Just using Tor isn't the solution to everything. For example, when you send an email through Tor and you sign it with your name, I am Alice, the exit node will know that. And the web server that you're communicating with will also know that. It's important to note, however, that the first and the second relay only see the content encryption, so they don't know who you are. The first relay knows where you're coming from, though. So while they can't learn what you wrote, they do have a good guess at who you are based on your IP address, probably. Then there's more problems. For example, let's say you go to a website. Let's say the website has a flash element, like a browser game. And this browser game, for efficiency reasons, bypasses the web browser's proxy settings. So instead of putting the traffic through Tor, they just make a direct connection. Which, of course, again, completely open to everyone who wants to interfere. And in the beginning, we said, well, basically, we make Tor, and then it's your problem to secure your applications. But that didn't work, because basically, no application is safe from a privacy standpoint, unless it's specifically designed. It's extremely rare to find an application that didn't have privacy in its design, which would be secure by accident. Our solution for that is that we provide a Firefox add-on called Tor-Button. Excuse me. Which basically hooks dangerous JavaScript, which disables plugins, and which makes using the normal web safe while still making it usable. Or rather, maintaining its usability. Because, as many of you probably know, just disabling JavaScript and everything will get you a web that is much less fun. So what Tor-Button tries to do is to prevent the bad stuff from happening while allowing the rest to work, to continue to work normally. The next thing is that for the average guy, installing stuff is hard. And so we started providing zero install bundles. We have made sure that they are reasonably safe against all the attacks that we know. And the interesting point here is that people usually don't think in terms of anonymity or security. And even people who have been in the security industry for a long time are often amazed at what these bundles do to ensure your safety. So checking out what they do is a good step before you use Tor. Our last point is extremely important. Tor does not magically make you secure. It cannot encrypt the internet. If you're going to a website that doesn't support encryption, you have no way to force that website to use encryption. Of course, your connection is encrypted in the Tor network, but that doesn't prevent anything between the exit node and the destination to do whatever attacks they can can do when you connect directly. So you as security people should make sure that you focus on encryption, on providing secure services, on always taking the local network as an adversary into account and trying to secure your services in such a way that you don't have to trust the network. Encryption, however, is not anonymity. So just providing encryption doesn't make Tor redundant. We just, as a general precaution, advise you to never use any unencrypted services, but we all know that's not possible. So what we do is we push towards making more websites encrypted, but we're not there yet, so you have to be careful. There are more problems, especially when you go into places that don't have what we Westerners would call a free internet. For example, try to use the internet in North Korea. You're going to have a tough time even finding a place that has internet. And when you found that, you're not being allowed to use the internet without being monitored. Tor can protect you here. Because if the software or your hardware is already attacking you, there's nothing Tor as a software tool can do. If a guy with a gun shows up behind you, you'll have tough luck uploading that YouTube video. But fortunately, that's still not common in most places, and it probably won't be common in large parts of the world, especially because the internet is just becoming more important for everyone. The second attack is you have to make sure that people actually get the real copy of the Tor software. Otherwise, there's no guarantee that they're actually using the right network. So even though you might think you have the right tool, you might not. And that's of course a common problem. When you fetch any kind of application and just install it without verification, you're basically already screwed. So, how do we make sure that people can get Tor? Of course, we provide it on our website, we provide signatures, but that's not enough, because our website is easily blocked, just like the censors block other websites. So what we did was we wrote a tool called GetTor. It responds to you when you send mail to it, and a lot of places that block torproject.org, our website, don't block Gmail, for example. So you can just log into Gmail, it's encrypted. People are often okay with that, surprisingly. And you can just request the software to be mailed to you. Of course, we still include the signature and everything, so you can still verify that's the right software if you have the ability to do so. But bootstrapping Web of Trust is really hard. So this helps get the software out, but it's not all that sophisticated. Then we have a secure updater. It's called Dandy. It's not deployed yet, but the software works, and we're testing it currently, and we're going to deploy it hopefully soon. It's basically a more secure updater compared to basically any other updater that's out there for open source software, in a sense that it actually does key management in a way so that you can verify that you got the right software, that even when you manage to compromise a key in the system, the entire system isn't affected, these kind of things. One good part about it is that it has net install capabilities, so you just need to fetch this really small installer, and then you can bootstrap your entire installation off of that. So, of course, this might require that we already ship a tiny client-only version of Tor with it, so that you can reach the website where we're distributing it from. But it's still a lot easier than getting the massive bundle that contains Firefox and an instant messenger and everything that you need for a secure environment. The other part that is neat is that you can update over Tor. And we're making sure that we're not breaking backwards compatibility in a way such that Tor suddenly stops working from one day to the next if you have a reasonably updated version of Tor. Just to not screw users who don't use Tor every day and who might run an older version. So, this is how you fetch the information about all the Tor relays. Basically, the relays or the servers, they push descriptors, which contain some basic information about them, like their key, their public key, their nickname, their IP address, what port they listen on. They publish that to a central directory. These trusted directories make a network status consensus, so every hour they publish a list of all the servers in the network. And this list of servers is distributed to caches, and the clients go to these caches to fetch the list of all the relays in the network. So, that's of course really easy to block. You just put the client in a box and don't allow connections to any of those relays that are listed in this document, and they can't use Tor anymore. And it's quite surprising, but basically nobody except for China does that. We don't really know why, but basically Tor works in most places, even though the website might be blocked. But we have a design, or here, first here you can see what happens when someone blocks the public network. So you can see the number of users in China was growing, and then suddenly, boom, nothing. They blocked Tor. We don't know why, but they unblocked it, and the user numbers started growing back a little bit. They didn't unblock everything, so users needed to be a little bit sophisticated. And so right now, we have a few users who are using Tor from within China by connecting to it directly, but nowhere near the number that we used to have. So a lot of people are effectively prevented from using Tor with this simple directory design. The solution to that is bridges. Basically, bridges act like relays that can only be used for the entry point in the network. And as long as you have at least one of these entry points into the network, you're okay from a security standpoint, from a reachability standpoint, because you can reach the entire rest of the Tor network, build your path like you usually would, and you don't actually have to trust this first relay at all. They could even theoretically publish your location as long as they provide access to the rest of the network. The design goal of bridges is that enumeration of all the bridges should be difficult, so it's not easy to block all of them, and we don't provide a list of all bridges. But it should be fairly easy for the individual blocked user to learn a few bridge addresses, so that it's not too hard to bootstrap into the Tor network. This is not an easy goal, especially if you recall we only have 500 bridges, and we had, on the last slide you can see that we have like 35,000 Chinese Tor users, and just from that, you can see that a lot of the users will have to use the same bridge. And that, of course, increases the chance that a sensor will learn about this bridge address. This is basically what a path would look like. Alice is basically just a Tor client running a bridge somewhere, providing connectivity to the network, and the block user just makes a path through the network. Important when you pick a circumvention tool. For example, you could pick Tor, but there are many others. There's a few criteria that you should have in mind. The first point is really important. You should pick a tool that has a lot of users and a large variety of users. Because, going back to the NSA example, if all your users are NSA employees, everybody will know that, oh, the network is used, some NSA guy is doing something. And so you don't want to use a tool that says, hey, we market to the revolution leaders in Iran. Because then just using the tool would be really, really dangerous. But the good thing about Tor is, in this regard, that Tor has a lot of users and a lot of boring users that use it to watch YouTube, for example. And the more restrictive your firewall gets, the more people will have an incentive to use Tor. So, in essence, this is kind of a trade-off that the sensors have to make. Because if 35,000 people use the software, then you have to visit each one of them. If only 10 of them use the software and they market it as being a tool for revolution leaders, just visiting those 10 will give you huge results, versus visiting 35,000 people takes a while. The next point is it's really important that your tool provides privacy, because otherwise you have to assume that in some way or another your data will get out. For example, you should not trust the Tor project to keep your data safe. We don't have your data, so we're not, so we couldn't even lose it, even if we tried. And that's a very important point. You should also check that the tool doesn't make promises that are unrealistic. For example, if a tool promises to magically encrypt the entire internet, that's unlikely. I don't think they can pull it off. And you should carefully evaluate the tool that you're using or endorsing, that it doesn't make promises that it can't keep. It's a good idea to use something that is open and peer-reviewed, because if it isn't, you can't be sure that it is actually doing what it promises to do. And if you can't update the tool, that's not a really good idea, because it's an arms race. Circumvention is basically an arms race. So just like the government can scale up, so do the circumvention software providers. But if your tool breaks and you have no other way to connect to the internet, then that's a bad thing. So hopefully your tool has something that requires you, or that allows you to get unblocked again without requiring fetching the entire software anew. So for example, in Tor you could fetch new bridges. The last point is, for some people, Tor is unbearably slow, but if your tool is too slow for you to use, then don't use it. It sounds like an obvious suggestion, but many people are using tools that basically aren't made for what they use them for. If your tool only allows you to get a few kilobytes of data through the net in an hour, then maybe that's good to exchange small text documents, but you're not going to publish a YouTube video. You're just not going to do it. So, the next part is that you don't want to use a tool that is in the press a lot, because not just does that mean that the sensors might get aware of the tool and might come knocking, it also means that the sensors become aware and are more likely So you can see that in China, basically, when you don't cause a big fuzz, you're fine. But as soon as you start making the politicians look silly, you're going to get blocked. As I've already stated, it's important to have a diverse community because you don't want to look like the high-profile target that maybe you are. And the large part is important for having a sustainable model, because if your tool is funded by just one party and that party decides that, well, they're basically done or they're not improving the situation, the tool is just going to stop existing. And this is important, especially when the tool doesn't have an open development model, because then when the servers are dead, so is your anonymity tool or your circumvention tool. So these are the Chinese tool users via bridges. You can see that obviously something bad happened. The censors learned how to block bridges. So for a while we had almost all the users who used to use Tor directly using bridges, and everything was cool. But then the Chinese learned how to enumerate, and you can see that in the past few weeks we've been getting a little bit better, but currently China is really difficult for us because they have huge manpower, and they have a lot of people dedicated to blocking circumvention tools. And if you're going to tell 20,000 real people, hey, go learn a Tor bridge address, and they do, chances are that all of the 500 addresses that we have, because we just have 500 bridges currently, are in the hands of the censors. So that's not a good thing. China is especially difficult because they do have the real people. You can't just put out captchas or anything of the like. They have people that will invest a few hours to learn 5 bridge addresses and send them on to the censors. So what do we need here? We need to beat them by having a higher churn in our bridges. Back in the day, we thought we should just have a huge number of bridges, and then they can't learn all of them, and then we win. But that's not how it works, because they're just going to keep learning new addresses. They're going to block some, and we have to give out the addresses that aren't blocked. So sooner or later, they have everything blocked. So the real solution is to have a high churn in your bridges. So have them on new IP addresses. Don't have them be available all the time, because as far as we know, China is blocking very precisely, meaning that if you provide a website on port 80 and the website is okay, and you provide a Tor relay on port 50 and that is bad, they're going to block your IP and port combination, and they're not going to block your entire server or your entire IP. This can change when you've run a bridge on the same IP and 10 different ports. Eventually they're going to say, hey, this is obviously something that's just used before, and we can't find any other legitimate service on that host. We're just going to null road everything. And that of course means that if that happens to you, you can't reach China either, which depending on who you are, might be a problem or not. What we haven't seen so far out of China is any kind of active attacks. So we haven't seen any man in the middle lane. We haven't seen that they just look at all SSL traffic and just disable SSL. Because China has so many businesses that are connected to the West that it just can't afford to turn off all SSL, because their business leaders would go crazy on them. The situation is different in Iran. Iran just blocks SSL when they want to. They just say, hey, something important is coming up, no encrypted web for you. And it does sound like they have a knob that they can turn, and they can either throttle or entirely turn off encrypted connectivity to the rest of the world. An interesting point is that when SSL is allowed, Tor just works. You don't need a bridge. You don't need anything. You can just use it. The most popular way to distribute it in Iran itself, because the website is blocked, is to just pass the software on a USB stick. This is what Iranian Tor users look like that use the network directly, that aren't using bridges. So you can see the number is just increasing. We're just getting more and more Iranian Tor users. These are bridge users. This here is a glitch in the graph. That's not a blocking event. You can see that that the number of bridge users is increasing too, because more people are becoming aware of the fact that when you use the public network and it's not blocked, people still know that you're using the Circumvention software and they might not like that. So, other countries, the whole Middle East basically censors their internet heavily. I would say the entire world basically censors the internet in some way or another. We just don't realize in our daily lives. Usually, the filters aren't really sophisticated. Either they just block via DNS. Some actually do some kind of pattern matching on packets, either on the headers. Others really do DPI tricks and look at everything, and just when they see Tor project, just reset your connection for your out. Some use proxy cascades, so you just get like 10 squids behind each other doing various things. And unfortunately, a lot of Western companies are the ones who are providing this technology. And if you happen to be in a position where you can do something about that, please do. It's not cool to be oppressing your citizens, and it's not cool to help these countries to achieve that. So, what could you do to help? You could run a bridge, or get someone else to run a bridge. You could do it from your home connection. You're not going to end up in any block list, because the bridge addresses aren't distributed to the web. If you don't have much bandwidth, that's cool too, because people who are blocked otherwise usually don't have high demands. Then you can allow us to distribute the bridge address for you, or you can disable that and say, hey, I want to just give it to a friend of mine who might be traveling into one of those countries. The way we distribute bridge addresses is that we have a single relay that all the bridges publish their information to, and this server places the available bridges into different pools, and you can query these pools for bridge addresses. For example, you can send an email, or you can go to a certain website. And of course, we don't give out all the bridges at once, we just give out small parts. And unfortunately, currently, we don't have enough to beat China. We do have enough to beat virtually any other country. What we need to do is, we need to measure how successful we are in distributing bridges, and we have to find a way to detect when they're blocked. So, the good news is that private bridges that aren't given out to anybody except the people that you individually trust work basically everywhere as long as SSL works. So, use the private bridge in China? Sure, it works. It's no problem. The only place that is good at blocking the non-private bridges is China, currently. And sophistication in most countries is low. So in most countries we work well. The next thing to do is we need to get better about realizing when our distribution method has failed. We need to get better about getting bridge addresses out faster, because if it takes so long to get out a new address that the sensor has had the time to learn it, then that's not good. And if your bridge is blocked, you want to get a new one that works relatively quickly. And you've seen all the graphs. We have metrics. It's kind of difficult to get accurate metrics because, after all, we don't want to screw our users' anonymity. But we have to improve them to more quickly learn about blocking events. Well, thanks. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
You can get some access to Tor current data by mounting your own exit point.
Pardon me?
You can gain some visibility to what goes on within the Tor network by mounting an exit point and seeing what data comes out of your system as an exit point.
Yes, you can do that.
In China, for example, mounting a number of exit points?
No, so we don't have any indication that this is happening, because it doesn't really help you, because you have no idea who the actual users are. So you just know that someone put it in. But that isn't what you as a sensor want to do. You basically don't care what everybody else in the world is doing, and you want to know who of your private citizens is violating the laws or doing something that you don't like.
Unless the data contains personal information.
Yes, that's true, of course. So this is a worry. That's one of the problems. We can't magically encrypt the internet. If you provide your information in clear text, then some people can read it. But they could do that anyways, whether you were using Tor or not. Yes?
It doesn't run on the iPad, right?
Pardon me?
It does not run on the iPad?
It does run on the iPad if you root it. But if you don't, then it doesn't. Apple doesn't allow us to run it yet. We're working on an application, but we think it's unlikely that Apple will tolerate it. It does run on Android, even without rooting. Even without rooting. Unfortunately, on Android, few applications support it. So you need proxy support in your application.
What about the possibility of an attack where, a particular organization or group of individuals, they control both the bridge and the network?
Yeah.
They, what type of information video can put together about
They, by using time analysis, could link both together.
Right.
So there currently is no design that prevents this attack for a low latency network.
Okay.
So basically the chance of this attack succeeding, or your chance, is the number of nodes you control over the number of all nodes squared.
Right.
And but yeah, that is just something where we would like Tor to be stronger, but there are no schemes available that would provide that for low latency network, where low latency is anything up to a few minutes. And a few minutes, of course, is already too slow for something like web browsing or instant messaging.
Sure.
Why just square?
Pardon me?
Why just square that?
That's just the way the probabilities work. I can explain the math, but I would prefer to do that offline.
One thing, at the moment you said there's 25,000 users in China, of a country of over 1 billion, I guess more. The only thing I see is how do you see this scaling? We talk about the bridges and so on, and I guess the end goal is that if you're a citizen in a block country, then in the end you can just get some software and you're on, and you can circumvent the census.
So Tor got a bit faster when China blocked it. So there definitely is an effect there. Tor has been scaling surprisingly well, but it will not continue to scale that way, just because currently we require that all the network information is available to every client. So if you imagine there were like 2 million relays, then you would have to distribute 2 million IP addresses to every client every hour or something. That's just not feasible. So
where do you see the ceiling of the project? Where does it?
It doesn't really end there. As soon as we've reached some scaling issue, we can split the network into parts and go on from there. The reason why that's not good is because then the total number of relays is low in your network, and an attacker has a higher chance. But that's what we're eventually going to have to do. Well, I think it's still a bit away. I don't see Tor gaining, suddenly gaining many relays. It would be great to do that, but I don't see it happening anytime soon.